We have the pleasure of welcoming Perry today to our interview series Leaders Hum. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Perry Timms is the founder of People and Transformational HR Limited. He is also the author of the book Transformational HR. He has also been listed as one of the most influential HR executives by world-renowned organizations. Passionate about changing the world of work, Perry is also a global TEDx speaker and advisor on the future of work and HR. We're happy to have someone of his experience to talk with us. Welcome, Perry.
Welcome. It's great to be here. I always have a little moment when an introduction like that happens because you kind of think, when I started in the world of work, is this where I wanted to be? And it clearly wasn't. But you just feel like it's been a journey that has shaped you so much. So thank you for such a warm and sort of clear welcome. So thank you.
Absolutely, our pleasure. So my first question for you, Perry, was if you could tell us something about People and Transformational HR Limited. Can you share with us your vision and the journey that brought you to PTHR?
Yeah, of course. So prior to being an independent practitioner, that was 2012, I held a couple of HR and organisation development and learning and development roles in the charity sector in the UK, and prior to that in the government service for the courts in England and Wales. But before that, I was involved in a lot of projects, and I think that's what really got me into the whole people and work kind of equation, I suppose you'd say. And technology was often involved in those projects. So I got to see technology evolve in the workplace. And I guess I've taken all of them into the work I do now. But what PTHR as a kind of an organisation stands for, the strapline we have is better business for a better world. And I think we've got obviously the current issue of a pandemic to deal with, but even prior to that we had climate emergency, we had a fragile economy even before that, and lots of people who weren't experiencing a good thing through their work. And that I think troubled me because I've had such a good one. It was almost like, how did I have a good one through my work? And there were lots of people struggling with mental health and just being unsatisfied about their work. So we aim to help companies create a place where people feel they belong, where the work they do is valued, where they have opportunities to learn and develop and progress, and ultimately become a sort of a good corporate citizen in the world to help the world with its own problems and its own challenges. And we do that through looking at how, I guess, the HR and organisation design and learning aspects of work can enable that and bring people to life. I guess that's the kind of principle behind it. So we do consulting and advising work, workshops and training and development, and as you articulated in the opening, things like speeches and writing so that there's a message. And we have some pretty, I guess you'd say, sort of defined principles about organisations that are more inclusive, organisations that aren't dominated by leaders, and organisations that are driven by more than just the acquisition of wealth, but that do good, provide good services for customers and are great places to work. And they all seem like they're very, I guess you'd say, ambitious elements, but there are some companies out there who do some fantastic things in all of those spaces. And I guess it's just creating that as a norm rather than an exception is pretty much why we exist.
Now, that is beautiful, actually. And what are specific or the most important challenges that you think that corporations go through, and how can they deal with that?
So I think there are two really key factors. One is the leadership within the organisation and how they behave and what they stand for, which links to the second part of it, which is the culture of the organisation. And I sometimes have a little bit of a challenge in talking about culture change because I think that's not a programmable thing that that you can just upload a new version. So the culture happens by not an accident, but lots of very, I guess, connected acts that people, particularly in leadership roles, demonstrate. And so if a company is particularly, I guess, aggressive in a sales market, then it may be quite a punishing environment for people to work with because the targets matter. And so if you feel a bit off and you don't perform, you're likely to get criticized and you feel disconnected because of that. And so I guess there are things in the leadership and the culture area that we try and work on. And where we get invited to go and work with a client, it's normally because a leader of either a chief executive, operating officer, or in many cases, an HR or chief people officer will come to us and say, right, we've recognized we have a challenge and an issue, and we think what we need to do is work in a different way to have more leading figures in the organization that help create a culture where there's more trust and inclusion and perhaps creativity and commitment, those kinds of things. So there's a recognition that there is a problem, a gap, or a weakness. That obviously helps because I then don't have to persuade people that there's something worth doing. That's been recognized. And then I help to build a solution to that problem that will involve, in many cases, lots of empowerment, lots of learning activities, and look at processes and how decisions are made. So they vary from client to client, as you would expect. But often what is at play is that the culture and the leadership kind of model is such that it's held all in one space. It isn't distributed. People don't feel like they have influence and can change and challenge things to create better. And we try and help disperse that kind of role so more people are brought into accountable and responsible kind of areas. And then we build the systems that help keep that as an operating system, so that it's not just some kind of project that's a flash and then it goes back to the old way. We try and bring this as a sustainable, improving, and I guess kind of administered and built by everybody rather than just in a boardroom or just in certain roles. And so that gets us into working with people who are right in the thick of dealing with customers and clients and partners and stakeholders and suppliers, whilst also connecting to the decision makers and the people who have the positional power. So we're often kind of acted in agency as an external perspective, bringing in some expertise and connecting those two forces, leadership and everybody.
That's really nice how you kind of get things and bring things together and try to help the engine run and make keep it well oiled. And so in this entire process, when you're kind of rewarding, you're recognizing people, how important of a role will technology and digital really make, especially if you need an inclusive culture, right now and in the future? How much will technology really help? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So where I see a good technology platform that connects people and work and decisions and allows things like creativity and good communication and inclusion, it makes it easier. So absolutely, it's a key factor in increasing your likelihood of success, maybe the speed and who gets to act on things. If a technology platform has that real connecting force, things are easier and quicker. Where the technology isn't quite as advanced, it can still be effective, but it takes longer because the technology doesn't bind people, it doesn't flow the work, it doesn't create the connectivity and the communication, the involvement and the influence. So it's crucial. Ironically, we've worked with some people who have wanted to introduce new technology, and so their technology is part of their gap. And that's when it's really, really hard to get that traction really quickly. But rather than just plug in technology, we work on culture and technology at the same time, almost in parallel movements, because as you start to get the culture to be more inclusive, that helps you build the technology that's the most appropriate, which then accelerates how the culture changes and how the leadership is then dispersed. So it's vital. And of course, in a world we're living in right now where we're isolated, automated by decree, then obviously that is the thing that is keeping a lot of people engaged, connected, and working. So again, if you had poor technology platforms, you would find it even harder to do this dispersed working as it is right now. So even in the best of times, yeah, it's a massive enabler. It's a massive congregating point, I guess, for the energy of people. So if somebody is in contact with a customer, has a fantastic idea about how other customers could be helped in a particular way by changing a product or a service to improve the speed or the reliability of a solution for them. If they're in a sort of far-flung part of the office and they perhaps don't have that connection with a lot of people of influence, that idea may just wither and disappear, and that would ultimately cost the organisation both in finance, customer retention, and maybe even employee retention. However, if that person was connected to a technology platform, could surface that idea and share that outcome, other people will find it, replicate it, use it. That's when you can see almost like a social change within an organization. And that's, again, where technology has such a vital part to play, because it isn't just a place where you can post a success. It's a place where other people can then improve how they work. So those are just a couple of examples where I think the tech is vital, connecting people, having influence, making changes, mobilizing, and being adaptable. So to have a strong technology platform that binds your organization, whether it's one or multiple applications, it's not just mission critical, it's beyond that. When we talk about human capital management, a lot of people do sometimes have a bit of a reaction because it sounds like a very cold technical term, but I know what we mean is the value that people create, not just because they follow a process, but they add to it, they enhance it, and so on. And I think when we're trying to get a hold on where is the work, where are the people who have the right skills and can do the right thing, a human capital management system helps you understand how to design the organization and the workflow in order to do that. And then when you want to do things like spot potential, identify expertise, share that, learn, collaborate, again, an HCM system just helps you map your organization and the people that are there so that you're acting on intelligence, not just on instinct, and actually you're using data trails and I guess you'd say analytics to help distribute fairly and keep a really strong sense of control, not over people, but about how well they're supported. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. If the platform is data driven and your decisions are more data driven, you will get better results rather than kind of being intuitive and making those intuitive decisions, right?
I think there's definitely been a tendency to underplay how important data is until probably about 5 or 10 years ago, where I think data analytics had a real revolution because the technology was starting to reveal just how much benefit could be obtained by what you described, good use of data and analytics. But then I think there's a match of skill that's needed and I guess an attitude as well within the profession, particularly in HR, to know how to do that. And by do that, I mean know how to mine the information you have now, to use it in decisions, as you talked about, and then look at what you are still lacking in when it comes to data, and look at how you can close that gap and create more of an integrated system where you've got multiple data sources that can give you much more three-dimensional views rather than just one line. So I think I've been used to HR reporting things like demographics and very basic human information, and now I see much more intricate, much more, I suppose you'd say, interrogatable data about performance and development potential and utilization and connectivity and communication, and all those sort of things are giving us a chance to go, actually, we over-communicate to people because what we're seeing from our data is they're overwhelmed. So therefore, we need to be more gentle or more specific about how we engage them in certain areas. And even though the workforce may not realise that, that's a good thing that we do. And I think that's what data's given us. It's given us a chance to be much more deliberate, much more planned, and much more intelligent about what we do in things like communication and workflow. And sadly, I think people in the workplace might not realise that. And so we're probably needing to articulate that more and involve them more, I think, in how we use data. So I'd say that's another gap we have to close. Good HCM, good data, good use. I think we also need to let people know that's what we do. And so I think, if we project ahead and we start to talk about more AI and automation, integration, then what people will probably worry about is that that's going to impact on them negatively. And it might mean there's a brutal kind of flow of work and it doesn't take into account any of the human variables. But if we let people know we're already using data to make decisions like that, it just isn't sophisticated enough that it automates the process. People might be a bit more comfortable going, oh, okay, so this is just another version, an iteration of what we're already operating in. So I think sometimes we ought to, as you used the engine metaphor earlier on, kind of lift the lid and say, look, this is how combustion works and this is what's going on here. And then we go, oh, I get all the things that sit underneath it. And then if we do want to dial up the technology to be even more sophisticated, we might have less of a fearful reaction and a more participative reaction in how people play a part in making sure that tech does the right thing and is good and ethical, and helps them even more in their job. So you're right. I think we owe it to people to let them in a little bit more to how technology is enhancing how effective we can be, both at an organizational level and at their level individually.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in your lifetime, career of lifetime, have you seen an increase in the adoption of such technologies? And, what are the kind of hindrances that people usually feel? Why are they hesitant to use technology if they are?
So I think yes is the easy answer to that about increased use of. I would say what is hindering some things is perhaps a skill set within HR to be more aware of how to use that technology in its broadest, widest and most powerful sense. To a lot of people, it's almost like just a database with some added workflow. And it's far richer than that, but there's a lack of exploration about what else it could do. And I do mean that in a non-critical sense, because, our HR colleagues are busy doing all sorts of things right now and have always been busy doing recruitment campaigns and everything else. So the reason they haven't become expert technologists is because they've just got a pretty distracting workload right now. But I see an emerging kind of strength in some practitioners that I know who are very good with technology, who have single-handedly implemented an entire ERP system or HCM system, got to know the technology, worked with the implementation teams, understood the full scale of functionality, and absolutely used it to the very sort of plus degree, and got some great results as a consequence. So that's one thing, the tech skill level, I think, in HR, as in implementing a system, leveraging it, I think that needs to be improved. Then I think what we have is often companies have very disparate systems. They have a purchasing and ordering system, they have a supply chain system, they have a finance system, they have an HR system, and often trying to aggregate the data that's in there to make some good people-based decisions can be really difficult. I mean, it's so difficult that sometimes the pain of the journey to try and get the tech to talk together is far too great, and people fudge it in the middle with manual interventions. That doesn't make it a great system, though. So I like to see more APIs, program interfaces. I think we need to tackle that one. And so any solution that can bring data in different formats that can then be used to interrogate and scenario model certain things is going to help a lot. So an aggregation, I think, is probably another disabling point. But then again, I think there's also then people's experiences of it. New technology is introduced and can create a little bit of tension because people think and feel incompetent in using that new platform and that new technology. So how we bring them in, how we skill them, give them confidence, means I think you can stretch the benefit further because people use it right and well. I see a lot of people who are using things like chatbots who then still want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody because they just don't like using the chatbot or they're a bit uncomfortable with it. Yet the chatbot could probably get their answer in a lot shorter time than being held in a queue trying to speak to an individual. So some of it is habits and attitudes and competencies and confidence. And I think if we invest in people to make the most of the technology we deliver to them, obviously the results follow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you're right, we also at peopleHum, we saw the main pain point of HR professionals where they were kind of struggling with, 16, 17 softwares in one particular company, and they had data, different sets of data. And then that's when we decided that we should make everything integrated, so we have
right.
that bot integrated, and we have like the complete experience of an employee in the same platform. So I think, that really makes a lot of difference, having everything under just one umbrella so that you're not wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. And to be fair, again, to my colleagues, where I've seen that technology as part of the equation, their skill set has improved because they haven't had the tech as an inhibitor. The tech has actually enabled them to make more of the data. And they've got better and better at both using the data in a predictive sense to say, if we move location, what would that mean in terms of human capital impact? And what's the market there like to recruit, and so on and so forth. And then I've seen them use it in a sort of deductive analytic sense as well, where they've been looking at the here and now and the performance and the flow and so on. So both in a projected sense, predictive data, and then using the data to inform, perhaps some short-term decisions or some process improvements. So you're right, that integration point is absolutely key, because there's almost then the ideal platform for the data to be manipulated and interrogated and ask it questions to reveal the answers that you need for the problems you're having. That's where I've seen the level of capability of HR professionals increase. So the tech then absolutely fosters a better, more technologically able HR professional.
Absolutely. So we've talking about, the tools part of it. We've talking about the process, and let's talk a little about productivity and people. How do you connect both of them? And it's very interesting. You're like a chief energy officer, which is very interesting to me. So if you could just elaborate on that as well, I think that would be helpful for our viewers.
Sure. Yeah, great. So there was a deliberate reason behind it, because being the CEO of yourself doesn't make much sense. But I have a reputation for being an energizer, and actually since then I've kind of looked into energy a lot more. So my second book coming out is called The Energized Workplace, because I do think we ignore actually that people are not like a device that you plug in and it has a constant hum of energy. It fluctuates with all sorts of things. If we are particularly challenged by something intellectually, sometimes that can raise our energy level because we love the challenge. Sometimes it can deplete it because we get frustrated that we don't know the answer. So energy in human beings is not an easy thing to predict. However, when we're talking about productivity, I think those places that can somehow energize their people also create a link to an uptick in productivity. And that's not just because they work longer or harder, but there is a more energetic approach to how they tackle problems, issues, disagreements, whatever it might be. So people and productivity, the energy thing I think sits in the middle and around that. It's almost like the Force in Star Wars. And so how does that happen? Well, I think it starts in a number of different ways, because if people feel connected and they belong to the organization, going back to our starting point about connection and influence, then I think there is already a kind of a plus on the energy side, because they're like, I know why I'm here. I believe in what this company wants to do for its customers, whether it's cleaning offices or whether it's, healthcare services. If people believe that the company has good intent, good ethics, good way of doing things, that's already an energy plus. Then I think we come into play within HR, because we create the conditions by things like job roles, job descriptions, competency profiles, learning and development, career opportunities, engagement activities, reward and benefits. All of those things help people, I think, understand a sense of value, and then links them to the value they create for the company a little bit more explicitly. Now, in the world we're in now, I don't think we make that strong enough connection. We recruit to a job description, we give people a job description, then it goes in the drawer and they never look at it again, where actually in it is the essence of why they're there and what they should do. And we then create performance management reviews, which feel like they're very much a kind of a functional exchange between a manager and a member of their team. Yet, we also respond really well to our peer feedback. We like getting responses from our team members about when we've helped them and so on. So I think we're sometimes a little bit under utilising those things when we can connect them to performance. We think if we have pay and bonuses, that is the driver for people to succeed, when actually I think a lot of research says that's not the only thing. It's a sense of purpose, as I started with, and it's the sense of being able to influence and make decisions. Dan Pink's famous Drive book in 2008-9 talked about mastery, autonomy and purpose, and I think that's pretty much what it is. People get to be good at things, they feel confident, it's connected to a higher purpose, and they have the ability to direct themselves, make decisions and feel like it, it's their enterprise, not just they're doing a job. So I think that's what we have a challenge in making that more of a regular thing in the workplace. So I think we need to pay attention to the relationship that people have with the reason they're there and the recognition of the value they create. And if we do that in a much more human, regular, purposeful way, I think that's when productivity starts to tick higher. And going back to technology as an enabler, the communication that comes with the technology, the connections you have with people and workflow and how you can assess your impact and your results and so on. Technology has a lot to offer there too. And I think we are probably not there yet, but I think we could get quite near to, almost like as an individual, you could have a dashboard by saying, these are the things I've done. And it says, well, here's the value that you've created, not just in an economic sense, but, customer satisfaction, community input, all those kind of things. And I think if we had access to that, we'd feel a lot more satisfied at the end of the day and perhaps not be so unaware of what value we create. I think a lot of people go home working hard and think, what did I actually achieve today? And I think if we can help people do that through technology, I think that'll be, a bit like if you've run 5K, it tracks how far you've gone. It tells you how many calories you've burned. You're like, yay. I think we need a workplace equivalent of that on a technology platform. I think we call that gamification, don't we, or game mechanics. And I think we've introduced that because we've recognized in particularly the video game world or whatever it is, that's kind of inspired us to spend hours and sense and achievement through it. I think it needs to be done sincerely. And I like the fact that you mentioned things like badges. So those are accomplishments that other people will feel the sort of the benefit in knowing they've got a trusted colleague who has these badges who can do some of the work. So it is a kind of validity thing. And I think people quite like that. It goes back, I guess, to medals and badges in Cub Scouts and on the classroom wall and stuff. So I don't think we ever tire of that. I think we always think that's a good way to endorse who we are and what we do.
Absolutely. Everybody likes games, isn't it? But, what do you think now after the coronavirus scenario? What are those features in a platform that would really stand out and, kind of be a differentiator as such?
So I guess what we're seeing is a couple of things, and it's obviously still early days, but I get this sense that the social connection is really important. So like I'm talking to you now, it feels like this could be that we're even in the same room because the dynamic is pretty intimate, and that's fine. But where we then see like 15 people on a conversation, that can get very chaotic in a technology world. So I think it's that gap between the intimate of 2 or 3 and the kind of chaos that becomes like 10 or 15 people on a call. Any technology that can kind of help make that a more realistic social experience as if you were in the real world, I think that would be a benefit of future kind of remote and home working. Will we see a massive shift to home working? Well, I don't think we'll see a massive shift, but I think we will have a lot more people saying, in normal circumstances where I'm not having to homeschool and worry about where my groceries come from and be locked in, would I want to commute less and spend some time either in my home or in a co-working space that's near to me? I think the answer might be yes, because I think we shouldn't underplay the social connection of going to a place and working with people. But I don't think that's where we will put all our interest in when we recover from this. So I think a lot of people are going to say, as long as there's some regularity of contact like this and some time where we come together, this is more convenient for my life. It makes me more focused in certain ways. It means I can go and pick my children up from school without a torturous commute. I don't pollute the environment anymore. I think people are going to say, this is better, maybe not all the time. So I think a platform that helps people feel really connected to their work and their colleagues will be even more critical than it is now. I mean, people are doing okay with email and Slack and other channels, but I think if there's a system that underpins all those social connections, great for workflow, doesn't negatively sort of, like impact on their breaks and variations and stuff. Yeah, I can see that being a post-corona reaction that would need to be facilitated. So it'd be interesting to see how the tech industry reacts to that perhaps increased need to be connected and social, but through a platform.
And how do you believe as we go into the future, right? How is the gig economy going to evolve? And when you consider the growing ranks of millennials in our workforce?
So I've watched this one for quite some time, being interested in what I can only describe as like alternative organisations who have had something very different about them. They've interested me for just the fact that it's new and perhaps pioneering. And I've seen it kind of grow, and I've seen it kind of perhaps have a bit of a backlash. Certainly, some companies have perhaps abused/overused that model, and therefore government legislation has come in and union representation has come in too. So I think we're in the early stages still of that maturity of that part of the working model and environment. And of course, a lot of people will say that in the gig economy, you've got some people who are utterly vital, like drivers, deliverers, and so on. And maybe you've got some others who are not quite so key right now, and their work has just disappeared, and they have no choice on what to do about that. So it is quite fragile, and it is quite emergent, I guess, in terms of policy and utilisation. Again, I think what's in its favour is choice, and that people can make a choice to work in that way because they would rather have one or two or three small gig type outlets, warehousing, Uber driving, whatever, because that suits their life, that suits their economic elements, and maybe they would prefer to be multiply employed rather than singularly, particularly in what's happened as a result of Corona. So so I think there's an interesting purpose or review of how that works post-Corona. And so flexibility, great. Choice, great. Fragility, not so great. Economics might be a bit of a challenge. Work benefits, and I guess you'd call it almost like the parachute that people might feel, where some companies are paying employees even though they're sort of not working, and some governments have obviously put some money into the economy to do that too. Those on gig type contracts just don't seem to have any of that kind of welfare aspect to it. So it does need a lot more review and perhaps a lot more fairness. But the flexibility, like I say, and the choice is what's caused its creation in the first place. And I don't think we should be too hasty to remove that choice, but I think we should look at how we can create a bit more stability around that flexibility. Will it suffer as a result of post-coronavirus? I think it will have some challenges that are probably different from paid employ. That there's probably no single body that will act in their interests, and so it will be at the kind of behest of different companies, perhaps reviewing how they want to use what I often call contingent workforce. I think it might be a case by case, company by company basis, but as an industry, it faces a big challenge, as we all do, but maybe with less representation and less specific lobbying powers to influence what's good for it. So I'd say we'll see. But like I say, it's there for a reason. So maybe that reason will be reassessed and we'll see a different version of it on the other side of this.
Absolutely. I think we'll have to embrace flexibility and just, see what we can do and make the best of our time. And, at this point in time, what is it that, talking about HR professionals especially, what do you think they should be focusing on the most at this point in time?
This point in time. So I guess if we're talking about coronavirus specifics, then it's the welfare of the people in their organisations and in their networks, and that shouldn't be underestimated in terms of not just the physical illnesses that come from the virus itself, but the kind of mental trauma of those people who've lost people close to them, people who've been in isolated environments, and that's impacted on their mental ill health. So I think there are almost like circles of impact of this specifically. But I think the other thing is obviously going to be, what is business then on the other side of this? If nobody's got any money and there are no customers, you can have all the great products if you want, but people won't be able to buy them. So so I think there is something that I keep coming back to, which is, can people professionals particularly help as part of not just a recovery plan, but a reinvention plan? Because if there is any salvation on the other side of this for an organization, it is, what is relevant now that may have been relevant before but isn't now, so I need to change, adapt, pivot, respond to different things. And that's a really tough way to operate for some companies that have had a very steady, stable product up to a point that's then almost not needed, and therefore in the new world, what is needed. So I think people professionals will have to keep their duty of care to people while simultaneously helping to design the organization, both in a job, a product and services, an operating model, an inclusion and fairness kind of equation. So, people professionals, I think, have really had a challenge, but have shown quite a large degree of compassionate and very rapid and intense support for people right now. So I've got nothing but admiration for the majority of my profession, who has really shown that there are humane and effective ways of dealing with an instant shutdown. And then on the other side of that, I think that is then, okay, how do we reinvent now? Not to avoid a crisis, because this is a sort of crisis that you couldn't have predicted, but how do we stay relevant, useful and good on the other side of this? Reinvention.
Right, so it's all about reinvention, and how can we be more flexible and kind of make this time really, really useful in terms of flexibility and to alter those processes to make it right. Absolutely.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Right. So I just have one last question. If you want to tell our viewers any important sound bites that you would like to leave for our viewers.
Wow, sound bites, yeah, a couple. So I think as we opened and we started to talk through the sort of the value and the whole essence of people in an organisation, then I think my kind of sound bite on this one is let's stop talking about people as our best asset, and let's start talking about our organisation as our people are, because it doesn't exist without them. So so I think we need to stop thinking about them as resources and think about them as they are it. They're the essence of our organisation. So change that narrative. I think then the inclusivity thing is crucial. And so I think there could be on the other side of this a way to bring more people into more influential parts of how the business is reinvented and shaped. So rather than just token consultation or working groups, I think it's almost like everybody gets a chance to reinvent this organisation on the other side. How do you do that? I think there are some clues already out there in the way that the software world uses all engineers, designers, and so on in the process. So agile and that kind of responsive and incremental and quite pacey way of doing things, I think, has to become our new signature. And that in itself is quite responsive and adaptable. But I think it's all about the inclusion and the pace and the creativity. So I think let's talk about the organisation in a human sense. Let's make sure that we are creating the right conditions for people by including them. And then I think we operate in an agile way to get there as quickly and as collectively as we can. And I think those are the three things I'd focus on: the narrative, I suppose the inclusion, and the agility.
Right, so we change the narrative, we need to be more inclusive, and we need to be more agile. Thank you so much for your time, Perry. It's been a wonderful conversation. Great. And I really appreciate you sharing your views with us. I really hope to stay in touch with you.
Let's do it. And like I say, it'll be interesting to see when we are through this about what's next. So happy that we perhaps circle back and see if there is some more things to talk about as our reinvention phase kicks in. But thank you for allowing me to share my views.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You take care, Perry, and I'll stay in touch with you.
You too. Be well.